Good evening, class. My name is Michael Little. For this discussion board, I will be discussing CPL 02-00-165, which is a compliance directive for the excavation standard 29 CFR 1926, subpart B. This directive supersedes CPL 02-00-087. The OSHA standards of applicability, broadly, it covers 29 CFR 1926 subpart P, and specifically 29 CFR subpart 1926.650, 29 CFR subpart 1926.651, paragraphs A through L, and 29 CFR 1926.652, paragraphs A through G. The key issues and applications to the CPL include emphasis on pre-inspection planning. When the compliance officer is planning an inspection, it is important for the compliance officer to review any pre-existing violations, as well as the company's or the contractor's safety record. If there has been previous violations, what has been done to mitigate those from happening again. If there's any repeated violations, just things that would kind of give the inspector things to look for when they get on the job site. The next thing that the compliance officer, or rather the CPL, recommends for the compliance officer is the competent person evaluation. So this competent person dealing with trenches, there's a lot of emphasis on the soil type. They need to know the different soil types, what is be the correct protective system for the type that they are working with, hazard identification, and hazard management. How are they going about mitigating those hazards or preventing those hazards that have been identified, and are they capable of identifying the hazards that might be identified by the employees, by the compliance officer, for example. Protective systems, it goes into the different types of protective systems and their applicability. It talks about sloping, shoring, and shielding, each of which has its own purpose. Hazard abatement, access and egress. When you look at access and egress, think about safe entrance and exit from the trench. Is there something in place for the personnel who enter the exit and exit the trench to work? Is there something there for them to safely get in and out? This may vary by the depth of a trench, and it all really comes down to the compliance officer's determination based in consideration with any applicable regulation. Utilities, when trenching, there has to be great consideration for utilities, or any excavation work for that matter. With utilities, the compliance officer wants to look to make sure things are marked, that the utilities have indeed been marked, and if they are present, some of the things the contractor needs to consider that the compliance officer also needs to look at is where exactly are these utilities, because there's certain tolerances that are set for utilities. For example, like gas, they can mark within 3 feet to the left or right of an actual gas line, such as natural gas or a pressure underline pipe can be within 3 feet to the left or right, and the depth may vary. Because it is marked, it typically does not indicate the depth. Some lines may be just inches underground, and other lines can be several feet underground. So it's important that if the excavation is occurring close to a utility, that the care is being taken, or even hand digging at certain points where utilities might be close to expose that utility, and protections are in place for those utilities if work is required to happen close to what is marked. When we think of water accumulation, you think of water intrusion into the trench that's being dug. Sometimes different areas in the country, different water table levels. You have to consider the seepage into the trench, as well as if this is going to be a more than 1 day operation or a 1 day operation where you're facing rain, tidal changes, etc. That needs to be considered, and a plan needs to be in place for either the removal or the prevention of intrusion of water into the trench. Placements near excavation. When we think about placements near excavation, it's discussing soil and equipment. So the general rule is no closer than 2 feet within the opening of the ground that equipment or spoilage from the entrenchment cannot be placed. This is for the purpose of keeping soil from rolling back in or equipment from falling in the trench. And hazardous atmospheres also need to be considered for hazard abatement. When we talk hazardous atmospheres, we're considering gases, anything that may be hazardous to human health or create a imminent danger to life and health situation where it needs to be monitored. For example, there might be something in the ground, or maybe a natural gas pipe has a leak and it's not noticed within the area. And when digging this trench, there's that exposure there. And if it's not monitored, or any other gases that may exist in the ground, that could kind of impose a pretty tragical situation. It also has to provide guidance to compliance. It provides guidance to compliance officers on documentation, measurements, and soil samples, and provides guidance on how to cite violations in accordance with Subpart B. When it comes to these guidances, the goal of the guidance is consistency. So no matter what a compliance officer is handling the inspection, that it that any that any officer will be consistent with another one that would come and would issue the same violation or identify the same hazards, etc. All right, and that will conclude it for my presentation. Thank you.